Hello, family. You are welcome to the Value Class podcast once again. And with your host, Bidemi Emmanuel. The subject of our discussion is a rather interesting one because it touches a very important psychological aspect of human existence. And this is the crux of the matter. The question that asks, are you introverted or you're fearful? It looks like an abstract question, but in all sincerity, the confusion is grand. And many who have diverse kinds of fear have accepted the title of an introvert because they have one thing or another that they are unable to break out from. So walk with me gently on this podcast. Now, being an introvert or an extrovert, and the third class, which is an ambivert, are just classifications and categories that were designed in the early 1920s by two different psychologists. They were designed by predominant characters. They were designed and categorized according to predominant characters. Now, it is only expected to be used for the purpose of definition. Although it can be very correct, it can be limiting at the same time. Now, by every definition, an introvert is someone who is more internally reclusive, while an extrovert is someone who is designed to be more social and externally motivated. While an ambivert is one who shares some qualities of an introvert and some qualities of an extrovert. They try to balance out the two sides. Wonderful set of creatures. But this is it. These definitions can be very correct. And yes, they are very correct. But they only define tendencies, not realities. They only define tendencies and not realities. Because every man can be changed, deformed, or reformed by experiences both palatable and unpalatable. So although they are correct, they are only definition of tendencies, not affirmation of realities. Now, if you look at this progressively, these definitions are only expected, like I said earlier, to be definitions of initial tendencies which are displayed after a period of observation. They are not necessarily expected to be final character set. This is because anyone with a growth mindset who prioritizes development, growth, and acquisition of knowledge over any other thing will easily slip from being an introvert to possibly an ambivert, if not an extrovert, according to how he needs it. And this is why I can fault the definition. Not because I intend to, not because I want to prove I am more intelligent, but because the reality is that for anyone who desires a change, and a significant one, they can easily beat down any character in exchange for the one they desire to have. Now, I would say this categorically and carefully, that behavioral patterns can be upgraded. you can take on another nature. It is very much allowed. Progress and changes are expected across all levels as long as you're human. As long as you're human. Changes and developments are a healthy sign of life. Once there are no changes and no developments, it is an initial signal for the beginning of death. So it is wise, if you ever desire a character change, if you ever desire a change in your character set, to not be limited by the definition of your initial tendencies. If you are an extrovert, if you have been defined to be an extrovert, and you ever desire to be more careful with your speech and with your actions, it is not too late. You can do that. If you have been termed an introvert and you desire to be more active and social with the right decision in place, you can take the lead and give birth to the changes you intend to see. So let's take a look at some of the characters of an introverted person while we compare it to the characters of a fearful person. Now, introverts are very thoughtful. They are creative, they are analytic, and they are predictive. I'll take it again. They can be very thoughtful, creative, analytic, and predictive. It means they are more internalized than externalized. In terms of expression, they would rather write than talk. It can be that amazing that they can choose to write over expressing themselves with speech because of certain emotions they do not want to reveal for other reasons. Now, while all of this seem to be good, it has many good sides as well, such that by virtue of their reclusive nature and their limited means of expression, they can develop certain skills that are very marketable. For example, for many of them who prefer to write rather than to talk, I assure you, over centuries, writing has been a very lucrative skill. And it still remains so even in this generation. It means it won't change anytime soon. Writing still remains lucrative. And because of their natural tendency, they can be very good at it. So, does it have its good point being an introvert? Yes, definitely. It is not a sickness, it is only a set of character. Now, introverts can be very self aware and observant. They pay attention to hidden details and knowledge. I would like to put it this way, they can read unseen patterns. The very patterns that are not clear to human understanding or are not clear to people who have short time of observation, they can read it because they have chosen to be mute and to observe carefully. And finally, I would say they are internally motivated. They are internally motivated, which means nothing on the surface, nothing external can motivate them as much. Everything that will motivate them comes from within, not from without. The pleasures they receive and they enjoy the most comes from within, not without. The motivation comes from within, also not without. Now, while all of these are strengths which makes them defined and peculiar, it can also breed a form of trouble. Now, because they are very thoughtful, creative, and analytic, on the bad side, they can overthink. They will think about everything, whether necessary or not. Now, because they have limited means of expression, they bottle up their emotions. And foundationally, that is the beginning of a psychological trouble. Even though they have very efficient mind, they can have a very efficient mind, highly effective. Internally, they are a field of blossoming flowers, and you can never take that away from them. A field of blossoming flowers. That is what I like to call them. Now, while being self-aware and observant, they can also be self-critical. I say again, while being self-aware and observant, they can also be self-critical. And finally, because they cannot be motivated by anything external, when they are demotivated, it is very hard to bring them back to life. Seeing that the only thing that brings them motivation comes from within, once they are demotivated from within, it is hard to bring them back to life. Whatever has to bring them back to life will be able to seep into their inner man and command efficiency at that level. Now, while being introverted has its pros, he also has its cons. He has the good side and he has the bad side. Now, how can anyone stay on the safe side? The best way to stay on the safe side is to acknowledge that whether being an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert is only a definition of initial tendencies, not final destinations. If you take it as an initial tendency, you will work on every undesirable aspect to make it better. In my few years of existence on planet Earth, I have seen people who were once considered very reclusive and deeply introverted become amazing hosts and display amazing talents. This is primarily because someone decided to make it known to them that they can be better and they should not limit themselves by the definitions of a textbook or another person who has read the textbook. Now, fear, on the other hand, is the most undesirable character anyone can ever display. It is so vile and so bad that nothing good can come out of being fearful. Oh yes, finally there's something that cannot produce any form of good. It is being fearful. And when an introverted person becomes fearful, it will take a supernatural act to bring them out of it, because they are now unable to decipher if they are just relating by their natural tendencies or fear has crept in. Because a fearful person also becomes self-critical. A fearful person becomes more thoughtful, but on the bad side, harbor negative thoughts. A fearful person becomes internally demotivated. Characteristically, you can say a fearful person takes on every negative character of an introverted person. And where does fear come from? I found a few, and I would like to show you. Fear can be experienced firsthand. Fear can be acquired from personal experiences. And oftentimes that is what is called trauma. Acquiring fear from personal experiences. Now, there are certain times people go through experiences that are unpalatable. and they do not want a repetition of that experience, such that anything that looks like that experience will put them off, and they become heavily critical and heavily withdrawn. It is like the story of someone who almost drowned in a pool. It will take a miracle to bring him near a river, because the experience will never leave him. That is personally acquired fear. Now, fear can also be acquired from other people. When you listen to superstitious beliefs, you listen to the stories of other people's failure and what I call unfaithful teachers, you can acquire fear. This time around, it is secondary, but it is just as effective as the one that was experienced firsthand. Now, I would like to categorically say this, that if there is anyone who has listened to 1,000 negative stories about marriage, they will not be the happiest person to desire to get married. Because their mind has been filled, programmed, and designed with a lot of evil stories concerning failed marriages. That is an example of acquired fear. You have not necessarily experienced it, but the experience of many others have crept into your heart and has done significant damage. And when I mean significant, I mean very significant. Now, there is no form of fear that is encouraged on any level, because it is the only thing that produces no good result. Now, there are certain characters that are manifested by people who have fear dominating their mind. The first is anxiety. Oh, they are worried about everything. They are scared about everything. The things happening, the things that may happen, and the things that have the potential of happening. So in response to that anxiety, they will never do anything. Now, because of the fear of what is unknown, they would rather stay fixed than grow. Because of the fear of the unknown, they would rather stay fixed than grow. And that makes them look like an introverted person, because it is usually believed that an introverted person likes their personal time and their personal space, unknown to them that fear has crept in, and the reason why they like their personal space and time is because they don't want to make mistakes and they don't want to fail, not knowing that success or failure is just a matter of perspective. Now, I say that casually, not minding the consequence of what I said and how I have said it, but failure and success is simply a matter of perspective. Now, they process a lot of negative thoughts, negative projections, due to actual fears. Trust me, some of their fears can be very true, and some of their traumatic experiences are not something you want them to experience again. But the truth is, even though it has the capacity to happen, it may not necessarily happen. And this makes them become incapacitated. Anxiety and incapacitation. Now, fear can manifest in the form of fear of things and of people. I found a few people who are scared of crowd. Now, this is not about the fear of addressing crowd. This is the fear of seeing crowd gathered in a place. I don't think something can be more tormenting than that. when you are afraid of seeing a number of people gather in a place. We are humans, we are social beings, and we are designed to exist by interrelationship. So why exactly should anyone be afraid of seeing a number of people gather and relating within themselves? It is not just an aberration, it should also be an abomination, something that should not be seen at any level. Now, it also looks like the character of an introverted person, such that they like to stay alone, not knowing that this person is fearful, not necessarily introverted. Now, a number of people have the fear of disapproval. Yes, they care so much about people's opinion that they are crippled by negative responses. I heard this from a wonderful speaker I love. He said, our fathers faced prison time and military harassment when they were clamoring for independence of their nations, African nations. Nowadays, we are faced with Twitter comments and Instagram abuses, and we are crippled by that. It's an abnormality, a very severe one. In fact, it is something that is not to be desired at all. The fear of disapproval, the simplest way to conquer it is by accepting that everyone is entitled to their opinion. And their opinion of you is a reflection of the knowledge that they have as at that very time. Because everyone who believes in a PMS powered automobile has no reason to believe in an electric vehicle. But someone believed in an electric vehicle and has brought it to life. Now, someone who designs a PMS vehicle might have thought, why exactly are you doing this? It is not going to be of any economic value, however. The world is now gravitating towards electric vehicles. If the designer of electric vehicles has been crippled by the disapproval of many others, he would not have that wonderful invention credited to him. Do not be moved by people's disapproval for any reason. Now, fear can also manifest in the form of fear of places and events, usually traumatic experiences. And the worst kind of fear I would mention is the fear of what does not exist. The fear that exists in the mind. It has no substance of reality. The fear of, am I good enough? Have I done well enough? Should I do better? A dissatisfactory form of fear that has no substance attached to it. And it significantly cripples the mind. It is vile, and it should not be allowed to happen to anybody. Now, having said so much and having said so little, being introverted is not a limitation. It is just a definition of initial tendencies. And like I said earlier, an initial template and initial behavioral tendencies can be worked upon if you ever desire a change. Now, for the Christian, it is quite interesting that we are not expected to conform to social constructs except it is in perfect synchrony with the Word of God and the definitions of the Scripture, such that we are expected to be developed into the image of the most perfect man, the Christ. If for any reason being introverted will not make you look like the one who paid the eternal price, then you should be willing to sacrifice being introverted and be willing to push against your personal bias and your current limitations. Yes, you should be willing to do that for the one who died for you. Now, may I mention that you can create the required space for the skill sets and associated behaviors that you need for a successful enterprise or endeavors. Just as I said earlier, and I have seen people who are condemned to be introverted and reclusive become hosts and very outspoken people. It is only a beginning, not the end. It is only an initial template, not the final destination. Now, identify these character boundaries, identify fear from everything we have discussed, and carefully analyze, delineate, and examine these characters such that you will never confuse fear with being introverted. It becomes a typical work after listening to this to ensure that you check the definition of an introvert, you check the characters of an introvert, wonderful characters anyway, and you compare it with fear, and you will be forced to acknowledge and to accept that it becomes your responsibility to separate your introverted tendencies from fearful tendencies. If you are able to successfully do this, which I expect you to accomplish, then you will be able to achieve many things easily. Life has never been fair to the weak. Life has never been fair to the unexpressive ones. It is like a game where the strongest ones win, or the loudest ones call for attention, and by that, they also stake a claim on victory. Being introverted is only an initial template, not a final destination. If you ever desire to get out of it, the best time is now. Actually, the best time was yesterday. The second best time is now. There's no promise of it tomorrow. The best time to take the right step is just now. This is a call to action. Do not confuse being fearful with being introverted. It is a mistake you should not make, because it is a highly cost mistake, and it will deny you of many things, many opportunities, many relationships, and many valuable openings yet bringing nothing in exchange. If it will take so much away from you in exchange for nothing, then never be willing to accept it. That is the reality of fear. Bury it, deal with it, and be ready to accept the fact that whatever you do is actually good enough. Because if you ever take a breather, you can do better. Let me say it again. Whatever you do is good enough. And if you actually take a second to breathe and analyze, you can do better. Even if what you did just failed, you can do better. I have a theory for the African child. You can never learn how to ride a bicycle without falling down. Yes, it's a necessity. You will have to. But falling down doesn't mean you should not learn how to ride a bicycle. Many times, people who learn to drive face one or two fears and scares in their first few attempts, yet they get over it. A first-time pilot in a turbulent wind will overcome it and fly again the next day. Face your fear. Do it right. just in case you did not make up to the mark, rest and do it again, more ferociously and more intentionally. Fortunately, I really do not like to use the word unfortunately. Fortunately for you, the ball is always in your court, not in anyone else's court. Only and always in your court. The choice to become a success or the choice to become a crippled failure, crippled by fear, is just in your hands. I would implore you to make the right decision. If you are an introverted person, it is only an initial tendency. Make the best of it, yet advance yourself. If you are a fearful person, face your fears. You won't die. You only get to live once. Live right. I say again, you only get to live once. So, live right. May I reintroduce myself? Dr Bidemi Emmanuel. And this is the Value Class Podcast. Enjoy yourself.